Welcome back to Garden Talk, brought to you by the Penn State Erie County Extension Master Gardeners. Again, I'm your co-host for today, Mike Bailey, along with Ellen DePlacido. Good morning, Ellen.
Good morning, Mike.
Hey, last time around we talked about thinking about planting a tree and some of the things that people should consider. Now this time around, we're going to talk about, how you might decide on what kind of tree presentation. When I talk about that, these trees are available in a couple of different. In fact, I got 3 examples written down here of how you might buy them. One is a bare root tree, and which are typically, only available in early spring because they're dormant. And then the other one is this balled and burlap wrapped tree, which are typically, field grown, hopefully locally because they don't transport these very far. And they dig them out and they wrap them in burlap, and sometimes they even put wire containers around the base, don't they?
Yes,
Okay,
they do.
to kind of
Yeah.
help support that process.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the container things, container grown trees. Okay, maybe you picked up on my idea about container grown trees. I call them things. Okay,
Things. Yeah.
they're planted in containers and they're maintained in a manner, okay, with some intensive watering and fertilization, but not without some problems.
Right.
So what we're going to do, Ellen said, okay, fine. Let's take the pros and the cons of each one of these particular approaches, and we'll kind of walk through them. And like I told you before, with these thinking about planting a trees, I get crazy about that. I'll try not to get too crazy about this because I'll save most of my craziness for the planting, because that's where I really get nuts.
Right.
Right. She just jumps right in and says, yes, he
I
does.
just know that.
So Alan's going to do the pros and I'll do the cons. Okay. So what
Right.
about these?
Right.
What about these bare rooted trees, Ellen? What are some of the pros there?
Well, there are a couple nice pros is that there's a lot of variety with them. Okay. If you buy a bare root tree, you have a lot to choose from. And they're also less expensive because naturally it takes less money to harvest them and to grow them. But there are some cons.
Yes, you're right. And
Hmm.
one of the cons, and I don't know whether it's a con or not, I guess, is that you kind of order them out of a catalog. This sight unseen, okay, is really what it comes
Yeah.
down to. I mean, they have nice pictures in them after how they would look after they grow, but when you initially get them, they look. Is this what I bought? This
Yeah.
scrawny
Right.
little thing, okay, with these straggly roots. But you know what? I prefer myself to buy bare rooted trees. Um, you get them early in the year. Okay, you get the roots in there, get them in the ground, and they adapt to, in my mind, so much easier. Okay, than some of the
Hmm.
other approaches. And like I said, they are small in size. So I mean, it's going to take a while for these to get a little bit of height on them. But like I've always told people, trees grow fast. I'd much
Hmm.
rather buy a small tree and plant it and nurse it along than buying a big tree, because I think it's less work. Okay, and once they start to take off, they take off. Uh, but they also need to be planted, soon after arrival. They'll come in a bag, scrunched up and stuff like that. And you gotta keep them in a cool place and a little bit moist, okay, before you can get out there, maybe the next day or the day after, and get them in the ground. But what about these balled and burlapped approaches? What are some of the pros there?
Well, part of it is that they're larger. They're pretty good size when you plant them. And one important thing is that they definitely won't be root bound because they are balled and burlapped. And it's really past the time when some plant or some pest could damage that tree. So maybe more successful once you plant that tree. Also, they're usually locally grown, so it's not necessary to ship them.
Right. And some of the cons might be that it's an expensive date, okay, when you
Hmm.
do it that way, because they're actually grown in the field locally. They have a big machine that digs them up, and it has a big ball of soil with it, and they plop it into this, typically a wire container that wraps it and supports it, and then they wrap it in burlap to keep it kind of moist. They're very heavy,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
they're difficult to transport. And when you get them to your yard, you got to have a little muscle around if you're going to muscle these into the site, into the hole that you want if you're doing the planting, on
Right.
your own. And they need some intensive care that first year. just like the other things. They need some good watering. You need to
Watering.
pay
Yep.
attention to that.
Hmm.
Granted, you can overwater things, but the most frequent problem that we see by far is that people have underwatered trees, no matter
Hmm.
what type it is. Now, what about these
Yes.
container grown trees, Ellen?
Well, container grown trees probably have the least amount of pros. um, a couple are that they are easy to transport and they're easy to lift because they are very contained in a container. And they're widely available. You'll find a lot of these container grown trees in a nursery, and there you can get a lot of different varieties there. But that's about the only pros that I can really think about because there are a
Yeah,
lot of
you're
problems when you get
yeah,
ready to plant them.
yeah, you're right. And before I mention the cons, can I just, while I'm thinking of it, I need to talk about transporting trees, whether it's container grown or balled and burlapped. When you go to a nursery and buy these things, if you're transporting them yourself, you have to kind of lay them down and cover them with a tarp.
Hmm.
Yeah, I hate to see it when people are driving down the street with these container grown or balled and burlap trees in the back of their truck, blowing at 45, 40 miles an hour. Okay, you know what that's doing to the leaves? It's really torturing
Hmm.
them. You're going to get your
Right.
tree off to a really bad start if you do that.
Hmm.
Lay them down in the bed of the truck. Okay, cover them with a tarp. Okay, so they don't get damaged during transport. Uh, but the cons of the container things, okay, like you said, it's tough. They do get root
Yeah.
bound, and
Hmm.
managing them is very, very important. Managing that root bound ball, and we're next session we're going to talk about planting trees, and we're
Uh-huh.
going to spend some time on these container grown trees. And whether we get to it next time or we'll have to get to it the following one, but we are going to get to it because it's so very, very important. Because most people buy container grown trees and plants right now, and you got to do it right. Otherwise, it's going to be a waste of money.
Hmm.
There's an intensive watering program here. That's so very, very important because this root ball of this uh, container grown plant, I think about it as it's almost like trying to get a cork wet. Okay, it's you almost can't do it, but they need it, especially as we get into the warm weather of the summer. Uh, they got a higher mortality than the bald and bare rooted or the bald and burlap things
Hmm.
because people don't seem to understand how important it is that you break up this root ball and keep it well moist. Um,
Hmm.
and uh, these plants are also typically kind of grown in warmer climates, so they're not necessarily really acclimated to our particular area. So you got to kind
Hmm.
of think of those things. But if you find a nice one and if you take care of it right, you get it planted correctly and you water it right, it'll do well. But
Hmm.
Ellen, we're out of our time for
Okay.
today. We're going to pick up on this again next time around. So thank you now.
All right.
Bye bye.
Bye.